Have you ever wondered why the greatest palaces in the world, where marble chills your feet and gold leaf assaults your eyes with excess, are missing the two most essential things for human life? You've been shown the Winter Palace, Buckingham, Versailles, Schönbrunn your entire life. These stone leviathans with thousands of rooms where each chandelier weighs as much as a car and walls are covered in silk that hasn't faded in 300 years. Tour guides breathlessly describe throne rooms, mirror galleries, and grand halls, but they shamefully avoid mentioning one thing: you have been deceived. Picture this: February morning, 1839. The Grand Throne Hall of the Winter Palace in St. Petersburg, 800 square meters of emptiness beneath 8-meter ceilings. Your breath turns to white clouds in the air. A tiny decorative fireplace in the corner, more ornament than function, fails utterly to heat this cathedral of stone and ice. Emperor Nicholas I stands before foreign diplomats in a fur coat. Think about that. The absolute monarch of the largest empire on earth inside his own palace, wearing outdoor winter clothing. The ambassadors around him shiver in velvet and silk, their lips turning blue. Protocol demands they appear comfortable. They are not. Breakfast was prepared somewhere, no one quite knows where. Servants carried it 100 meters through an open courtyard in a January blizzard where temperatures reach -25 Celsius. The soup arrives with a greasy film of congealed fat on top. The roasted meat is cold as stone. The bread is hard. The smell in the corridors is not of roasted meat or fresh bread. It's the stale, acrid stench of urine-soaked chamber pots that servants empty from windows into the courtyard below. Buckets of human waste line the service hallways because there is no plumbing. Now ask yourself the impossible question: how could a civilization capable of creating the Amber Room, where 6 tons of amber panels fit together with microscopic precision, where each piece was carved and polished to perfection, forget to install an oven for baking bread? How could the engineers who erected St. Isaac's Cathedral, raising a dome without a single structural nail, calculating load-bearing capacity that modern architects study in textbooks, forget to run a ceramic pipe for sewage? How could the hydraulic geniuses who laid 200 kilometers of waterworks for Peterhoff's fountains, creating pressure systems we can barely replicate today with computer modeling, not figure out how to heat a bedroom? There is no logical answer. Either you possess engineering mastery of the highest order, and then installing a kitchen stove is child's play, or you live in primitive squalor. But then where do these palaces come from? Where does the Amber Room come from? Where do fountains that have functioned flawlessly for 3 centuries come from? You cannot have both. Yet here we stand, told to believe that the same hands that created architectural miracles simply forgot the basics of human habitation. That kings who commissioned buildings requiring mathematical calculations beyond the reach of their era somehow couldn't manage a fireplace that actually works. The stones don't lie. The cold doesn't lie. The stench of those corridors, documented in letters and diaries of everyone who lived there, doesn't lie. Something is catastrophically wrong with the story we've been told. Let's talk about Versailles. The most interesting part is just beginning. Write in the comments what city you're from, and don't forget to hit like and subscribe. The tension is rising. Who's watching us from where? Drop a like and subscribe to the channel. There's more to come. Mark yourselves in the comments. Which country are you from? Hit that like button and subscribe. The plot thickens. Let's check our geography. Right where you are right now, smash that thumbs up and subscribe. We're just warming up. Tell us, where are you watching from? Support the video with a like and hit that subscribe button. The climax is near. Share what corner of the world you're in right now. Drop a like and make sure to subscribe. Things are developing rapidly. Write your city in the chat. Slam that like and hit subscribe so you don't get lost. All the juiciest stuff is ahead. Let's get acquainted. Who's from where? Hit like and subscribe right now. The intrigue is building. Write where you're watching this episode from and reward us with a like and subscription. Emotions are off the charts. Quickly write what city you're from. Drop a fat like and subscribe to the channel. The palace that housed 3,000 courtiers at its peak. 3,000 nobles, servants, guards, and administrators living under one roof. How many built-in toilets did it have? 0. Not a single one until the mid-19th century. Louis XIV, the Son. King himself used a portable stool chair. A servant would carry it to him, wait outside the door, then carry the contents to dump from a window into the gardens below. The wealthiest, most powerful man in Europe, defecating into a bucket. But here's where it gets interesting. The waterworks at Versailles functioned flawlessly. Water traveled 15 kilometers through stone aqueducts using nothing but gravity. The pressure was so precise that fountain jets shot 25 meters into the air without a single pump at the palace itself. The machine de Marly, the pumping station that fed Versailles, was an engineering marvel that makes modern hydraulic engineers weep with envy. 14 massive water wheels, 221 pumps, lifting water 150 vertical meters from the Seine River. The complexity rivals a modern hydroelectric station. Do you understand the binary trap you're in? Either you possess engineering of this caliber, and then running a sewage pipe to the royal toilet is literally elementary physics, or you live in filth. But then where do such fountains come from? Where does this hydraulic precision originate? There is no third option. Now let's calculate Peterhoff, the Grand Cascade outside St. Petersburg, 64 fountains, 255 bronze sculptures, all fed by a 27-kilometer canal system from the Ropshaw Heights. The main Samson fountain shoots water 21 meters straight up every single day for 3 centuries. To achieve this requires exact calculations of gravitational pressure from elevation drop, pipe diameter ratios, flow rate coefficients, nozzle aperture geometry. These are calculations modern engineering students solve using computer software. We're told illiterate serfs with hand tools accomplished this in 1715, but it gets worse. During restoration work in the 1970s, Soviet engineers discovered the original 18th century cast iron pipes. They ran metallurgical analysis. The interior surface was smoother than modern equivalents. The metal composition was superior to anything Soviet foundries were producing. The connection flanges, the joints between pipe sections, showed precision machining impossible to achieve by hand forging. One engineer's report stated, quote 1, "Now let's destroy St. Isaac's Cathedral. Official history, built between 1818 and 1858. 40 years of construction, required 300,000 tons of granite, marble, and brick transported into the center of St. Petersburg. The granite columns alone, 48 of them, weigh 114 tons each. They were quarried in Finland, loaded onto barges, floated across the Baltic Sea and up the Neva River, then erected using wooden scaffolding and hemp ropes pulled by teams of haulers. Let's calculate what this actually means. 300,000 tons over 40 years equals 7,500 tons per year. That's 25 tons per day, every single day, for 4 decades straight. No winters off, no floods stopping work, no epidemics, no wars. Now calculate the horses needed to move this. A heavy draft horse pulls maximum 1 ton on a dirt road. You need 25 horses per day just for material transport. But horses need food. 15 kilograms of hay and 5 kilograms of oats daily per animal. That's 500 kilograms of fodder per day just for 1 day's construction materials. Multiply across 40 years. Where are the hay fields to feed 730,000 tons of horse fodder? Where are the stables for the thousands of horses cycling through? Where are the mountains of manure they'd produce? Enough to bury the city 10 meters deep. Where are the brick factories that produced billions of bricks for the historic city center? A brick factory running full capacity produces 50,000 bricks per day. St. Petersburg's historic core contains an estimated 15 billion bricks. That's 300,000 factory days of production. That's 800 years of a single factory running non-stop. But where are the clay quarries? They don't exist. The geological surveys show no depleted clay deposits anywhere near St. Petersburg sufficient to produce this volume. The forests that would need to be clear-cut for kiln fuel, gone without a trace. The industrial zones, the worker settlements, the infrastructure of production. None of it exists. The buildings stand, the facades gleam with granite and marble, but the production bases that created all this do not exist, as if someone materialized the city from thin air, or excavated it from beneath the earth. Walk down Nevsky Prospect in St. Petersburg, or Tverskaya Street in Moscow, or any historic boulevard in Paris, Rome, New York. Look at the buildings. Really look. The windows are jutting from underground, half above street level, half below. Basement windows with decorative iron grills, positioned where no basement should be. Official history calls this the cultural layer. 2 to 3 centuries of accumulated dirt, garbage, and debris that raised street levels 3 to 4 meters. 4 meters is the height of a 2-story building. They want you to believe cities lived in such apocalyptic squalor that human waste, horse manure, and garbage compacted for centuries until it buried the ground floors of buildings, that people just kept walking on top of this festering pile, building new streets on top of compressed filth. But when archaeologists excavate these basements, they find grand entrance portals with carved stone frames, full-sized windows with decorative molding and intact glass, frescoes painted on the walls, tile floors with intricate patterns, vaulted ceilings with architectural details. Who decorates an underground dungeon that no one will ever see? The answer screams at you. These floors were ground level. Something buried them, a global cataclysm that deposited meters of soil and mud across entire continents in a geological instant. Now look at the doors. Winter Palace main entrance, 4 meters tall. The Hermitage galleries, doorways you could drive a car through. Buckingham Palace staterooms, door handles positioned at the face level of a modern adult human. Why would you place a door handle where someone has to reach up to grab it? The grand staircase at the Winter Palace has steps so high you must climb them, not walk. Each riser is 30 centimeters, double the height of normal stairs. Your thigh muscles burn after one flight. This is architecture designed for beings 3 meters tall, but it gets stranger. These palaces have 6 to 8 meter ceilings. Enormous windows with single panes of glass, each sheet weighing hundreds of kilograms, walls barely half a meter thick. This is Mediterranean architecture. Buildings designed for warm climates with mild winters, natural ventilation through high ceilings, large windows to catch coastal breezes, thin walls because insulation isn't necessary, but they're built in St. Petersburg, where winter temperatures drop to -35°C, where the sun disappears for months, where thermal retention is the difference between life and death. Catherine the Great's letters document the unbearable cold. She wrote about ink freezing in inkwells before she could finish sentences, about wine developing a crust of ice during dinner, about sleeping under 5 layers of fur blankets and still shivering through the night. Why would you build a palace in northern latitudes with the insulation characteristics of an Italian summer gazebo, unless these buildings were designed for a different climate or a different heating technology we've lost? Now examine the earliest photographs. Daguerreotypes from the 1840s of St. Petersburg, Moscow, Paris, Rome, New York. The exposure times were long, 15 to 30 minutes per image. Moving objects blur into ghosts. People disappear, but look at what remains. Ringing, total emptiness. Streets completely vacant. Not a single cart, not one market stall, no horses tied outside taverns, no stationary objects of any kind. The official excuse? Long exposure times erased people and moving objects. But where are the coachman's carts that stood for hours waiting for clients? Where are the merchant stalls that remained in the same spot all day? Where are the guard posts at military barracks? Soldiers standing watch for 8-hour shifts? Where are the horses tied outside inns while travelers ate lunch? All these objects are stationary by definition. A market cart doesn't move for 12 hours. A tied horse stands in place. A sentry box is permanent architecture, yet they're all absent. The cities stand completely ready, magnificent architecture, cobblestone streets, gas lamps installed and functional, but empty like stage sets awaiting actors who haven't arrived yet. And then there are the children. The 19th century saw an explosion of orphans unlike anything in recorded history. Millions of children without parents, without family histories, without memory of ancestors, Moscow and St. Petersburg orphanages overflowed beyond capacity. London and Paris shelters couldn't handle the influx. In America, between 1854 and 1929, the _5_ transported over 200,000 children from East Coast cities to the frontier, distributing them to farmers as free labor. 200,000 children. Where did they come from? Where are the mass graves of their parents? What disease killed adults but perfectly spared children? What war, what famine, what plague produces orphans by the millions while leaving infrastructure completely intact? The records are silent, the archives burned, the genealogies end. It's as if an entire generation of adults simply vanished, leaving behind empty cities and millions of children who had no memory of who built the world around them. What if those we call czars and emperors were simply settlers in someone else's homes? Imagine this scenario. It's the year 2025. A global catastrophe has wiped out 90% of humanity. Electromagnetic pulse destroyed all electronics. The survivors, your descendants, wander through abandoned cities. They find a smart home. Solar panels on the roof, automated climate control, touch-screen panels on every wall, a toilet that cleaned itself with UV light and recycled waste into fertilizer, a kitchen with induction surfaces, and a hydroponic garden on the roof. But the power grid is dead. Your descendants enter this technological marvel. They see the touchscreen panels, just blank glass now. They press them, nothing happens. They don't know about circuit breakers, about system reboots, about the server farm 300 kilometers away that controlled everything. They see the toilet, it's a strange ceramic chair with a bowl of water. The automated cleaning system is silent, the recycling mechanism is incomprehensible. They don't understand the pipes, the valves, the sensors. What do? They burn firewood in the bathtub because it's ceramic and won't catch fire. They use the toilet as a pantry to store dried meat because it's cool and enclosed. They relieve themselves in buckets and throw the contents out windows. They place candles where the LED lights used to be. They cook over open fires in the middle of the living room, cutting a hole in the ceiling for smoke. To archaeologists, 300 years later, it looks insane. Why would they build a house with climate control but cook on open fires? Why install a self-cleaning toilet but use buckets? Why wire the house for electricity but use candles? This is exactly what we observe in palaces. Versailles has the machine de Marly, hydraulic engineering that rivals modern systems, but the king defecates in a bucket. The palace has geometric precision in its architecture that requires advanced mathematics. But there's no kitchen. The fountains work perfectly for 3 centuries, but the inhabitants freeze in winter. They didn't build these structures, they moved into them after the original inhabitants vanished. Now consider an even more disturbing possibility. What if the previous civilization didn't need food as we understand it? Ancient texts speak of people who fed on prana, energy absorbed directly from air, sunlight, Earth's magnetic field, yogis who went years without eating, saints who survived on spiritual sustenance, legends dismissed as mythology. But what if they weren't legends? If the original builders possessed a fundamentally different metabolism, perhaps photosynthetic, perhaps drawing energy directly from the planetary grid, then the absence of kitchens becomes perfectly logical. They didn't need thermal food processing, they didn't need ovens, stoves, or chimneys for cooking because they didn't cook. And if their biology operated at a molecular efficiency, we can't imagine breaking down waste at the cellular level or teleporting unnecessary matter to disposal sites through technology we'd call magic. Then they didn't need sewage systems either. We call this fantasy, but what if for them it was Tuesday? Look at the star forts scattered across the planet, the Peter and Paul Fortress in St. Petersburg, Fort Jefferson in Florida, Bourtange in the Netherlands, Palmanova in Italy, hundreds of them on every continent. Official story, defensive structures designed to resist artillery bombardment. Look at them from above. Perfect geometric figures, 6 pointed stars, 12 pointed stars, mathematical precision in every angle and radius, moats filled with water surrounding them in perfect circles. Why would a military engineer draw a 12-pointed snowflake if the goal is defending against cannon fire? Any fortification expert will tell you. The simpler the form, the easier the defense. Complexity creates weak points, but these forts are intricate fractals like circuit boards or resonator diagrams. The water in the moats wasn't for defense. Water is a conductor. What if these were nodes in a planetary energy network? What if palace domes were atmospheric electricity condensers? What if the crosses on top weren't religious symbols but antennas? What if the metal reinforcements in walls were wiring? What if fountains weren't decorations but functional elements of hydraulic energy distribution? When that system failed, or was deliberately shut down in the early 19th century, the civilization that depended on it died. And we moved into their houses not understanding what we'd found, using their technology as furniture, cooking fires in their energy distribution centers, mistaking their temples for our palaces. Notice the terrifying regularity with which cities burned specifically in the 19th century. Moscow, 1812. 80% of the city reduced to ash in 3 days during Napoleon's retreat. Official story: Russians burned their own capital to deny the French shelter. New York, 1835. The Great Fire destroyed 17 blocks of Lower Manhattan in December in freezing temperatures where water froze in the hoses. Chicago, 1871. The entire city center obliterated. Official story: Mrs. O'Leary's cow kicked over a lantern. San Francisco, 1906. The earthquake gets the headlines, but the fire destroyed the city. Flames that burned for 3 days, consuming even stone buildings. London burned repeatedly. 1666, 1794, 1834, Parliament, 1861. Paris had major fires in 1871 during the Commune. Boston in 1872. Seattle in 1889, dozens more. The official explanation: wooden structures and carelessness with fire. But look at the photographs. These were cities built of stone and brick, granite blocks that should withstand any ordinary fire, yet they crumbled to sand, as if exposed to temperatures exceeding 1,500 degrees Celsius, temperatures unachievable by burning wood or coal. Stone doesn't burn, granite doesn't melt from a kicked lantern, but the photographic evidence shows buildings reduced to powder, metal beams twisted into spirals, glass melted into rivers. This was systematic territorial cleansing, destruction of evidence. And notice what burned most thoroughly: libraries and archives. The Library of Alexandria, the ancient world's greatest repository of knowledge, burned. The exact date is conveniently __8__ Moscow's Patriarchal Library, 1812. Centuries of ecclesiastical records gone. The Library of Congress, 1851. 55,000 volumes, including Thomas Jefferson's personal collection. Fire started ___9___ the Indian Library in Moscow, 2015. Over 5 million documents, electrical fire, millions of pages of dissertations, rare manuscripts, historical records, ash. Every time someone gets too close to unraveling chronology, every time technical drawings of ancient systems surface, every time metric books that could prove genealogies are examined, short circuit, arson, convenient accident, census records burn. Old world maps vanish, construction estimates disappear, metric books that tracked births, deaths, and marriages, the only proof of continuous genealogy, go up in flames with suspicious regularity. But the most cynical deception was the world's fairs. Paris, 1889, Chicago, 1893, St. Petersburg, 1896, Buffalo, 1901, St. Louis, 1904, San Francisco, 1915. The official story: for these exhibitions, in just 1 to 2 years, they built gigantic temporary cities, domed palaces, colonnades stretching for kilometers, artificial lakes, electric illumination systems, sculptures, fountains, gardens. Then after 6 months of exhibition, they demolished everything. Why? Official answer: The buildings were made of staff, a mixture of plaster, cement, and fiber, temporary construction materials. Do you believe this? Look at photographs of the 1893 Chicago World's Fair, quote 11. The buildings surpass the U.S. Capitol in architectural complexity, intricate molding, detailed frescoes, massive sculptures, domed roofs with complex geometry. You're telling me they built this in 18 months using plaster and straw, then tore it all down? Calculate the labor. The 1893 Chicago Fair covered 690 acres, over 200 buildings. If each building took 100 workers, that's 20,000 laborers working simultaneously for 18 months. In Chicago, weather, brutal winters where plaster work is impossible. The mathematics don't work. The terrible truth, these complexes weren't built for the exhibitions. They were excavated, dug out from beneath the mud layer, restored, shown to the public as, quote, 12 of the modern era, then ruthlessly demolished and razed to the ground. Why destroy them? Because they were too perfect. They revealed a technology level impossible to explain with steam engines and gas lamps. Inside these exhibition halls functioned moving sidewalks that transported thousands of visitors, wireless lighting systems with no visible power source, acoustic systems that projected voices across enormous spaces without amplification equipment, water features with pressure dynamics that modern engineers study and cannot replicate. Leaving these structures standing was impossible. People would ask questions. Engineers would investigate. The gap between official technological capability and observed reality would become undeniable. So the elites who seized power after the catastrophe, who settled into the empty palaces, erased the evidence. They turned the old world into a 6-month carnival attraction, then physically destroyed it, and they burned the archives that could prove what really happened. We live among the ruins of a civilization of gods, using their temples as barracks for our primitive existence. Palaces without kitchens and toilets scream that we are strangers here, that we were settled into someone else's homes and given a script. You built this, your ancestors created this, be proud, and we're proud. We don't notice the contradictions stacked so high they blot out the sun. The fountains at Peterhoff work flawlessly for 300 years without major repair, but the toilet in the Imperial Palace is a bucket behind a screen. We were given matches and candles, so we'd forget about etheric electricity that once powered entire cities wirelessly. We were given gunpowder and cannons, so we wouldn't remember the planetary energy grid that made war obsolete. We were given central sewage as a progress achievement in the 1850s, though they took away eternal architecture that generated zero waste. Look at what cannot be faked. Stones don't lie. You cannot forge millions of tons of granite. You cannot fabricate the metallurgical composition of pipes that surpass modern equivalents. You cannot fake the mathematical precision of hydraulic systems that require computer modeling to understand. When physical evidence contradicts the narrative is the lie. The engineering precision exists. The buildings stand. The fountains flow. These are facts that cannot be explained away by appeals to quote 15 or quote 16 lost techniques as code for quote 17. Now look at your own genealogy, go back 3 generations, your great-grandparents. Most people can name them, maybe recall a story or two. Go back 1 more generation, your great-great-grandparents. Darkness. For 90% of people, family memory cuts off completely at this point. No names, no stories, no documentation, birth records that should exist in church registries and municipal archives, burned, metric books that tracked every baptism, marriage, and burial, gone in convenient fires. This isn't accident. This is systematic erasure. We are a civilization of orphans, descendants of those artificially settled in emptied cities after the catastrophe. We were raised in orphanage incubators by the millions, given standard surnames Ivanov, Petrov, Sidorov in Russia, Smith, Johnson, Williams in English-speaking lands, generic identifiers assigned to children with no past. We were taught a simple linear history, primitive ancestors gradually progressing toward modernity. Rome fell. The Dark Ages happened, the Renaissance brought enlightenment, the Industrial Revolution brought progress, a fairy tale for children who needed to forget. Forget that the doors are 4 meters high because we weren't the original residents. Forget that windows start underground because the world was buried under meters of mud in a geological instant. Forget that palaces have no kitchens because those who built them didn't eat as we do. We are settlers, survivors of a cataclysm so complete it erased the previous world. We moved into their buildings, sat on their thrones, wore their crowns, and convinced ourselves we were the inheritors of their glory rather than scavengers picking through ruins. The elites who orchestrated this, whoever they are, whatever they know, have maintained the lie for 2 centuries. They burned the evidence, demolished the exhibition halls, rewrote the timelines, gave us a history that makes us small, primitive, proud of progress that is actually regression. They need us to believe we're ascending from savagery. The truth is, we're descending from greatness we can barely remember. The stones remember, the buried floors remember, the empty photographs remember, the millions of orphans remember in their DNA, in the generational trauma of forgetting, in the gnawing sense that something is catastrophically wrong with the story. You feel it, that's why you're still reading. The official narrative has cracks wide enough to drive a cathedral through, and once you see them, you cannot unsee them. The palaces without kitchens are not architectural oversights. They are evidence that we are not home. The 4-meter doors were not built for us. The windows, half buried underground, mark the true ground level before the world was drowned in mud. The palaces without kitchens prove their builders didn't process food through fire and digestion as we do. We weren't meant to be here. We are the survivors who inherited a world we don't understand. Every piece of physical evidence points to the same conclusion: a technologically advanced civilization, one that harnessed planetary energy, built with mathematical precision we cannot replicate, and possessed biological systems fundamentally different from ours, vanished in the 19th century. What remains cannot be faked. The granite blocks weighing hundreds of tons, transported and placed with precision modern cranes, struggle to match. The cast iron pipes with metallurgy superior to contemporary production, the hydraulic systems functioning flawlessly for centuries, the geometric perfection of star forts that serve no military purpose but perfect sense as energy grid nodes. Physical evidence trumps narrative, always, when the official story requires you to believe that the same civilization capable of creating the amber room with microscopic precision somehow forgot to install a working fireplace. The official story is a lie. When you're told that cities accumulated 4 meters of cultural layer in 2 centuries, but excavated basements contain frescoed walls and decorative entrances, you're being deceived. When they show you empty daguerreotype photographs and claim long exposures erased all stationary objects including market carts and tied horses, they're hoping you won't do the math. The pattern is undeniable once you see it. Precision engineering combined with primitive living conditions, Mediterranean architecture in Arctic climates, massive infrastructure with no production bases, millions of orphans with no parents, archives that burn whenever genealogy is questioned, exhibition palaces built in months, then demolished, cities that appear fully formed in empty photographs like stage sets awaiting actors. This is not accident, this is cover-up. Whoever controls the narrative, the academic institutions, the historical societies, the archives that selectively burn, needs you to believe in linear progress, needs you to think your ancestors were primitive and you are advanced. The opposite is true. We are the diminished descendants of a catastrophe. We live in the ruins, cooking fires in energy distribution centers, using buckets in buildings designed for waste-free biological systems, shivering in structures built for a different climate or heating technology we've lost. If this investigation gripped you, if you felt the official narrative cracking under the weight of physical impossibilities, don't stay silent. The algorithms bury content that questions approved history. They need this to disappear. Share this now before it's shadow banned into oblivion. Subscribe to see the next exposés. We're just getting started. The rabbit hole goes deeper than palaces without kitchens. Write in the comments which historical anomaly we should dissect next. The star forts, geometric perfection serving no defensive purpose, scattered across every continent like nodes in a planetary grid. The empty city photographs, 1840s images showing fully developed infrastructure with zero population, as if humanity was still being moved into position. The vanished giants. Why doors are 4 meters tall? Why museum collections quietly removed skeletal remains of 3-meter humans? Why every culture's mythology speaks of a race of titans that preceded us? Vote in the comments. The truth is a collective excavation. Together, we'll tear down the curtain of lies hiding our real past. The stones don't lie. Million-ton granite blocks cannot be forged. Precision hydraulic engineering that surpasses modern capability cannot be explained by primitive tools and illiterate serfs. Mathematical perfection cannot emerge from societies that allegedly couldn't solve basic sanitation. We will reclaim the history they stole from us. The palaces without kitchens are not architectural curiosities. They are not oversights or cultural quirks. They are proof that we are settlers in someone else's civilization. And once you see it, you cannot unsee it. Share this before they delete it. The evidence is physical, undeniable, and terrifying to those who maintain the lie. The stones remain